Hey, y'all. I've always believed that the shows that we binge and the movies we love are more than just entertainment. They're a window into who we are and who we might become. They're a place to talk about what truly matters. Welcome to Culture First, Democracy Always. I'm Tasha Pierce. Think of me as your favorite auntie who could talk about the latest sci fi flick 1 minute and then get to talking about voter suppression the next. On this podcast, we break down pop culture from the movies and TV shows you love to the books you can't put down to talk about power, talk about freedom, and talk about survival. We'll connect these stories to our current politics and the constant, everyday resistance we all face. Because culture shapes who we are, and democracy is the freedom to be that person. Culture first, democracy always. The plight of the people of Wakanda, one of the poorest nations on Earth. With no natural resources to speak of and a completely isolationist policy, the Kingdom of Wakanda remains a mystery to the outside world. People have said that.
Is this your king? Is this your king?
Keep on back! 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 Keep on back!
Welcome back to Culture First, Democracy Always. That opening, that's the lie the world was told about Wakanda. A clever cover story, not to control its people, but to protect them. Now, last week we were sipping coffee in Westview, learning how a comfortable illusion can rewrite reality to control citizens. Today, we're heading somewhere very different. Wakanda. Wakanda is a place that rewrote its own reality, and in doing so, preserved its strength. When Black Panther hit theaters, it wasn't just a movie. It was a cultural earthquake. But underneath the action and the Afrofuturist glow, there's a lesson worth holding on to. Cultural identity isn't just heritage. It's resistance. Here's our roadmap for today's episode, y'all. First, we're going to look at how Wakanda built an unbreachable fortress of culture and how identity is the real vibranium. Second, we're going to break down the tools of self-preservation from Shuri's lab to oral traditions and connect them to real-world struggles. Third, we're going to dig into T'Challa versus Killmonger because that's what we were all there for, right? And how that conflict reflected the tension authoritarian leaders love to exploit. Finally, we'll ask what Wakanda can teach us today, how culture becomes both shield and beacon. So let's just dip through the holograms and into Wakanda. Part 1, The Unbreachable Fortress of Culture. So, what is Wakanda really? On the surface, it's a fictional African nation, the most technologically advanced society on the planet. But it's hidden from the world, posing as a developing country to protect its greatest resource, vibranium. Now, vibranium in the movie is this miracle metal, the source of their tech and their wealth. But it's also a very powerful metaphor. Think of vibranium as a people's culture, their knowledge, their unique resources. For centuries, colonial powers have swept across the globe, extracting resources, not just mineral and oil, but knowledge, art, and human beings, right? Wakanda's greatest act of resistance was saying, no, this is ours. You cannot have it. Their isolation wasn't just a defense strategy. It was a radical political statement. It was a declaration of permanent sovereignty. Now, the key here is understanding the difference between isolationism and strategic self-preservation. Wakanda wasn't hiding because they were scared. They were hiding because they understood that exposure to unchecked external greed is an existential threat. They were protecting their culture from being co-opted, diluted, weaponized. And how did they preserve that sovereignty? Through culture, through their traditions, their language, their spiritual beliefs, their ceremonial combat. These aren't just quaint customs. They are the software that runs their society. They were the firewalls that protect them from outside influence and internal decay. When T'Challa becomes king, he doesn't just sign a document. He undergoes a spiritual journey, connecting with his ancestors. Now, this ritual reinforces the idea that leadership is a sacred trust, not a power grab. That is a culture designed to preserve its autonomy. In a world that constantly tries to assimilate, dilute, or erase distinct cultures, Wakanda chose to build a fortress, not just of mountains and holograms, but they did that, but they also built a fortress of identity. They understood that if you lose your culture, you eventually lose your country. So in the fight for democracy, cultural strength is not a secondary asset. It is not a clutch that you carry with the perfect pair of pumps. It is the foundation upon which all other forms of resistance are built. Your identity is your political fortress. Part 2, the tools of self-preservation. So, this brings us to our first critical lesson from this movie. Protecting your identity is a political act. For marginalized communities, simply existing authentically can be a form of defiance. Wakanda uses its resources not to conquer, but to empower itself from within. Shuri's lab isn't just about creating cool gadgets. It's a symbol of how technology, when developed and controlled by a community, serves that community's needs and values. Their education system, their use of storytelling through the griot tradition, these are all tools of empowerment. They ensure that every generation of Wakandans know who they are, where they come from, and what they are fighting to protect, keeping the ancestral knowledge secure. If knowledge is a bag, ancestral knowledge is a Birkin. Wakanda is what Africa could have been if colonization had never stripped it bare. It's a what-if world where Black culture, traditions, and genius flourished without the outside interference. We see powerful, real-world parallels to this every single day. Think about the fight to preserve and revitalize indigenous languages in North America after centuries of forced assimilation in boarding schools and the such, or the ongoing effort to protect historically Black neighborhoods, cultural districts, universities from gentrification, destruction, which doesn't just displace people, it also erases history and culture. Think about the current fight to maintain the integrity of the exhibits at the Smithsonian. These are not just social issues. They are deliberate acts of resistance against a dominant culture that too often demands conformity and a sanitized version of history, something that makes them feel good, right? Preserving your culture is preserving your power. So I want you to think about your own heritage, your own community, whatever that is. What is one tradition, one story, one piece of art, one recipe that makes you feel a sense of pride and connection? What is something that feels uniquely yours and serves as a source of strength? I want you to share that with me. Send me a message or share it on social media. Let's celebrate the cultures that make us who we are, because recognizing that strength is the first step in using it. Part 3. Killmonger versus T'Challa, the politics of grievance. All right. One of the most powerful aspects of Black Panther is the conflict between T'Challa and Killmonger. Now, this isn't just a physical fight, it's a conflict between two valid, agonizing worldviews. Killmonger represents pain, the rage of the diaspora, the cost of being cut off from his roots, the abandonment and suffering inflicted by global white supremacy. He's not just a villain, he's a symptom of a systemic wound. He saw the pain of his people in Oakland and in the United States and across the globe, and he concluded that the only way to heal it was to seize power and inflict pain on his oppressors. His solution is revenge and global conquest, using Wakanda's technology as a weapon. T'Challa, on the other hand, represents balance, the weight of tradition, but also the responsibility to evolve and to share. Now, he's burdened by the knowledge of his ancestors' failures, the choice they made to keep the world suffering while they remain safe. He's trying to lead with wisdom, not just rage. And there's a real world connection here. The part that authoritarian leaders love to exploit: the politics of grievance. Authoritarian figures everywhere, from Panem to modern day politics, understand that genuine pain and legitimate rage are extremely powerful motivators. They latch on to a true injustice, like Killmonger's diasporic pain. And then they funnel that energy not towards healing or justice, but towards division and their own power consolidation. They stoke rage, they pit groups against each other, and they use division to consolidate control. The fight isn't just about resources. It's about who gets to define identity and who gets to wear the crown of righteous avenger. When you are consumed by rage and grievance, you stop thinking critically about the proposed solution. Killmonger's plan was to become a global oppressor using the tools of the old one. He allowed his righteous rage to lead him to a profoundly undemocratic, autocratic end. And this dynamic plays out in our community all the time, y'all. Think about the political reality we find ourselves in right now. The majority of Black folks, based on generations of experience and political foresight, warned the country exactly what we would be in for during a second Trump presidency. And of course, we were right. But now you see pockets of our people, pockets of Black people who are using every opportunity they get to point out that we were right, to rub it in, to offer a biting critique, but who refuse to participate in any actual acts of resistance because they're tired. That is the moment when our righteous anger sours into this counterproductive grievance politics. We are so focused on validating our prediction that we are sacrificing the future. We're becoming spectators. We're criticizing the fight from the sidelines, using our past trauma and our political insight as an excuse to do nothing. We risk becoming paralyzed by the very pain that we want to fight. The greatest gift you can give an authoritarian leader is a divided resistance. Killmonger would have loved that. As a matter of fact, he kind of exploited a little bit of that in the movie. He would have actually loved a movement so busy fighting over who was right and who was wrong that they couldn't stand together to protect the kingdom. And the lesson for us as grown people is that we have to fight with clarity. We acknowledge the pain, the police violence, the voter suppression, the economic injustice. We're going to acknowledge all of that. We're carrying that with us. But we have to reject the solution that demands that we surrender our own principles or choose a new autocrat, because those are probably going to be your choices. You'll trade one Trump for another one. We need to identify with T'Challa's difficult path of responsibility and evolution over Killmonger's path of vengeance and paralyzing rage. We got this insight from years of taking L's until we got some W's. We need to use that insight to fuel resistance, not to justify inaction. The most powerful act after seeing the truth is to stand with those fighting for change, regardless of who gets the credit. Part 4, From Wakanda to Our World, Shield and Beacon. So, what are more actionable takeaways here? Because we can't build a super hidden city, but we can adopt the Wakandan mindset. First, we can actively support cultural preservation in our own communities. This can mean donating to a local museum, attending cultural festival, supporting businesses run by people from different backgrounds in our communities. It means advocating for school curricula that teach a full, honest version of history, not that squeaky clean bullshit that they're trying to push to our children now. Second, we can invest in local education and arts initiatives. So remember, Shuri's Lab is a reminder that genius is everywhere. It just needs resources and opportunity. Supporting a local STEM club for kids, funding a community arts project, mentoring a young person. All of those are ways to build up our own vibranium, the untapped potential in our own neighborhoods. Finally, we have to recognize how culture shapes our politics and our activism. Black Lives Matter movement, for example, it's not just a political movement. It's deeply cultural. It draws on a long history of Black art, music, spiritual traditions of resistance. When we understand that, we see that activism isn't just about protesting. It's also about creating and sustaining a culture that demands and commands justice. Now, I got a book recommendation. If you were moved by the world building in Black Panther, I am going to strongly recommend the work of Nnedi Okorafor. She's a brilliant Nigerian-American author of Afrofuturism and African Jujuism. So her novel, Who Fears Death, is absolutely stunning. It's intense. It is a magical read that explores identity, power, and tradition in a post-apocalyptic Africa. It's not easy to read now. It's not an easy read, but it's almost an essential one. Ultimately, the lesson from Wakanda is that our heritage is not just our past, it's our strengths in the present, and it's our blueprint for the future. So think of it like this. Every cookout, every church choir, every quinceañera, every powwow, every drag ball, every story that starts with back in my day, all of that is resistance. Culture keeps us alive when systems try to erase us. At the end of Black Panther, T'Challa makes a revolutionary decision. He decides to open Wakanda to the world. He realizes that true strength isn't just about protecting yourself. It's about sharing your knowledge and fighting for others. The fortress becomes a beacon. And that's the final crucial lesson. Our cultures can be our shields, but they shouldn't be our cages. They give us strength to engage with the world, not hide from it. We protect who we are so that we can confidently and powerfully advocate for a better world for everyone. Because they can take your vote, they can censor your speech. But if they can't erase who you are still free. That is the foundation of democracy. Culture first. Democracy. Always. Before I let go, I want you to join me for the deeper dive. Thursday is newsletter day. I'm going to be expanding on the Killmonger versus T'Challa conflict. We're going to look at specific historical examples of how righteous rage has been exploited by authoritarian movements, and you'll get the articles, the context, the recommendations you need to connect the dots. So subscribe to the newsletter via the link in the show notes. All right. Next week, we're going to take a sharp turn from an Afrofuturist paradise to a dystopian nightmare. Yeah, y'all, we going to Gilead to discuss The Handmaid's Tale, and we'll be breaking down the warning signs of democracy's collapse and how quickly freedoms, once we lose them, are terrifyingly hard to get back. So I'm pretty sure you won't want to miss it. That will be the last episode of this arc. So please, please, please join me next Wednesday. And also during the week, connect with me on Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, at Culture First Always, so we can keep building this community together. And if you have the time, give me some feedback. Send me something over at culturefirstalways@gmail.com. Gosh, I'm stumbling over my own name. All right, y'all. See you next week. I hope this episode gave you a new way to look at the stories around you. It's so easy to feel alone in this work, but remember, there's a whole community of grown folks out here connecting the dots. If you're not already subscribed, my newsletter drops every Thursday and provides a deeper look at these themes. It's like an email from a friend who's just a little obsessed with connecting culture and politics. You can find the link in the show notes. And also, let's connect on social media too. I'm on Blue Sky, Threads, and Instagram, and I just love continuing these conversations with you all throughout the week. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to tune in next Wednesday for the next episode. And I'm Tasha Pierce. Culture first, democracy always.